Welcome to 5 Good Minutes.
You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Romans
with Dan Irvin.
Welcome back as we've been walking through Romans 5, 6 through 11 this week. And I just want to look at verses 9 through 10 today. And this introduces, Paul does, an idea that might be a little uncomfortable at first. This idea that we, the human race, needs to be saved from something. Paul writes these words starting in verse 9, "Since we have now been justified by his blood, how much more shall we be saved from God's wrath through him? For if, while we were enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his Son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life?" You know, this idea that we have been saved from the wrath of God. I mean, this is not an idea that I think a lot of people like to think about. I don't know if you like to think about the wrath of God. For me, I prefer to think about God's mercy and his generosity, his kindness. You know, the wrath of God is not as popular. But this idea that we are saved from God's wrath. You know, Paul is talking about something that it's not the wrath that perhaps we consider. Maybe you grew up in a situation where there was a parent in the house that was emotionally, let's just say, unhinged at times. And there was moments of outburst and anger and violence. Maybe it wasn't even in your house. Maybe it was just where you grew up. And when you think about wrath, there's a negative connotation. This is associated with a person who can't get it together, who can't control themselves. This is not what Paul is talking about here. When we talk about the wrath of God, this is God's settled opposition, his holiness coming out in every way that the world has been ruined, what he loves, the world, the people that he's created. This is God's wrath, his anger burning towards that when he sees the people he loves going in the wrong direction. If God truly loves mankind, his creation, then he has to oppose what destroys it, sin. See, love without wrath, without justice, there is no healing. There is no hope. A God who would just shrug and look the other way at evil, injustice, selfishness, that wouldn't be a loving God at all. And Paul's honesty here, it's not that the problem is just out there in the world, but it's inside of us all. The problem isn't merely that there's a distance between us and God. Is that something in us is resistant towards God's authority. Something in us insists that we would be the judges of our own lives, that we would rule, that we would be the ones in control. That's what's broken. That's why Paul says here that we have to be justified. We have to be justified by his blood. This word justification, it's all throughout the book of Romans. This is a word that carried heavy weight in a courtroom. To be declared right in the sight of God. To be declared righteous in the sight of God. Not because we have been proven innocent, but because there was someone else who stood in our place, someone else who took the punishment, someone else who satisfied the very wrath of God. While we were still enemies with God, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son. Listen to that language. God did not wait for us to come back, to clean ourselves up, to make the first move. God moved towards us. The cross is an ultimate display of compassion, of mercy, of love, of rescue. God takes the judgment that we deserve so that his wrath can be satisfied so that we can receive the life that we don't deserve. What a gift. I hope you've been living in these 5 verses this week. I hope you're on your way to having them committed to memory. Write them on your heart forever so that you can know beyond any measure of a doubt that God is for you, that he loves you, that his wrath has been satisfied once and for all.
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.